Æthelwulf was king of Wessex from 839 to 858. In 825 his father, King Egbert, defeated King Beornwulf of Mercia, ending a long Mercian dominance over Anglo-Saxon England south of the Humber. Egbert sent Æthelwulf with an army to Kent, where he expelled the Mercian sub-king and was appointed sub-king. After 830, Egbert maintained good relations with Mercia, and this was continued by Æthelwulf when he became king in 839, the first son to succeed his father as West Saxon king since 641. The Vikings were not a major threat to Wessex during Æthelwulf's reign. In 843, he was defeated in a battle against the Vikings at Carhampton in Somerset, but achieved a major victory at the Battle of Aclea in 851. In 853, he joined a successful Mercian expedition to Wales to restore the traditional Mercian hegemony, and in the same year his daughter Æthelwulf married King Beornwulf of Mercia. In 855, Æthelwulf went on pilgrimage to Rome. In preparation he gave a decimation, donating a tenth of his personal property to his subjects. He appointed his eldest surviving son Æthelbald to act as King of Wessex in his absence, and his next son Æthelbert to rule Kent and the southeast. Æthelwulf spent a year in Rome, and on his way back he married Judith, the daughter of the West Frankish King Charles the Bull. When Æthelwulf returned to England, Æthelbald refused to surrender the West Saxon throne, and Æthelwulf agreed to divide the kingdom, taking the east and leaving the west in Æthelbald's hands. On Æthelwulf's death in 858 he left Wessex to Æthelbald and Kent to Æthelbert, but Æthelbald's death only 2 years later led to the reunification of the kingdom. In the 20th century, Æthelwulf's reputation among historians was poor. He was seen as excessively pious and impractical, and his pilgrimage was viewed as a desertion of his duties. Historians in the 21st century see him very differently, as a king who consolidated and extended the power of his dynasty, commanded respect on the continent, and dealt more effectively than most of his contemporaries with Viking attacks. He is regarded as one of the most successful West Saxon kings, who laid the foundations for the success of his son, Alfred the Great. Background: at the beginning of the 9th century, England was almost completely under the control of the Anglo-Saxons, with Mercia and Wessex the most important southern kingdoms. Mercia was dominant until the 820s, and it exercised overlordship over East Anglia and Kent. But Wessex was able to maintain its independence from its more powerful neighbour, Offa, King of Mercia from 757 to 796, was the dominant figure of the second half of the 8th century. King Beornwulf of Wessex married Offa's daughter in 789. Beornwulf and Offa drove Æthelwulf's father Egbert into exile, and he spent several years at the court of Charlemagne in Francia. Egbert was the son of Ealhmund, who had briefly been king of Kent in 784. Following Offa's death, King Beornwulf of Mercia maintained Mercian dominance, but it is uncertain whether Beornwulf ever accepted political subordination, and when he died in 802 Egbert became king, perhaps with the support of Charlemagne. For 200 years 3 kindreds had fought for the West Saxon throne, and no son had followed his father as king. Egbert's best claim was that he was the great-great-grandson of Ingild, brother of King Ein, and in 802 it would have seemed very unlikely that he would establish a lasting dynasty. Almost nothing is recorded of the first 20 years of Egbert's reign, apart from campaigns against the Cornish in the Age 10s. The historian Richard Abels argues that the silence of the Anglo-Saxon chronicle was probably intentional, concealing Egbert's purge of Beortrix magnates and suppression of rival royal lines. Relations between Mercian kings and their Kentish subjects were distant. Kentish ealdormen did not attend the court of King Coinage, who quarrelled with Archbishop Wilfrid of Canterbury over the control of Kentish monasteries. Coinwulf's primary concern seems to have been to gain access to the wealth of Kent. His successors Æthelwulf and Beornwulf restored relations with Archbishop Wilfrid, and Beornwulf appointed a sub-king of Kent, Baldred. England had suffered Viking raids in the late 8th century, but no attacks are recorded between 794 and 835, when the Isle of Sheppey in Kent was ravaged. In 836 Egbert was defeated by the Vikings at Carhampton in Somerset, but in 838 he was victorious over an alliance of Cornishmen and Vikings at the Battle of Hingston Down, reducing Cornwall to the status of a client kingdom. Family. Æthelwulf was the son of Egbert, King of Wessex from 802 to 839. His mother's name is unknown, and he had no recorded siblings. So far as is known, his wife Osburh was the mother of all his children. She was the daughter of Oslach, described by Asser, biographer of the son Alfred the Great, as King Æthelwulf's famous butler, a man who was descended from Jutes who had ruled the Isle of Wight. Æthelwulf had 6 known children. His eldest son, Æthelstan, was old enough to be appointed King of Kent in 839, so he must have been born by the early 820s, and he died in the early 850s. The second son, Æthelbald, is first recorded as a charter witness in 841, and if, like Alfred, he began to attest when he was around 6, he would have been born around 835. He was King of Wessex from 858 to 860. Æthelwulf's third son, Æthelbert, was probably born around 839 and was king from 860 to 865. The only daughter, Ethelsworth, married Birgit, King of Mercia, in 853. The other 2 sons were much younger. Ætheld was born around 848 and was king from 865 to 871, and Alfred was born around 849 and was king from 871 to 899. In 856 Æthelwulf married Judith, daughter of Charles the Bull, King of West Francia and future Holy Roman Emperor, and his wife Ermentrude. Osburh had probably died, although it is possible that she had been repudiated. There were no children from Æthelwulf's marriage to Judith, and after his death she married his eldest surviving son and successor, Æthelbald. Early life. Æthelwulf was first recorded in 825, when Egbert won the crucial Battle of Ellanden against King Beornwulf of Mercia, ending the long Mercian ascendancy over southern England. Egbert followed it up by sending Æthelwulf with Ealstan, Bishop of Sherborne, and Wulfherd, Ealdorman of Hampshire, with a large army into Kent to expel sub-king Baldred. Æthelwulf was descended from kings of Kent, and he was sub-king of Kent, and of Surrey, Sussex and Essex, which were then included in the sub-kingdom, until he inherited the throne of Wessex in 839. His sub-kingship is recorded in charters, in some of which King Egbert acted with his son's permission, such as the grant in 838 to Bishop Beornmod of Rochester, and Æthelwulf himself issued a charter as King of Kent in the same year. Unlike the Mercian predecessors, who alienated the Kentish people by ruling from a distance, Æthelwulf and his father successfully cultivated local support by governing through Kentish ealdormen and promoting their interests. In Æthelwulf and Æthelwulf rewarded the friends and purged Mercian supporters. Historians take differing views on the attitude of the new regime to the Kentish Church. At Canterbury in 828, Egbert granted privileges to the bishopric of Rochester, and according to the historian of Anglo-Saxon England Simon Keynes, Egbert and Æthelwulf took steps to secure the support of Archbishop Wulfrid. However, the medievalist Nicholas Brooks argues that Wulfrid's Mercian origin and connections proved a liability. Æthelwulf seized an estate in East Malling from the Canterbury Church on the ground that it had only been granted by Baldred when he was in flight. For the West Saxon forces, the issue of archiepiscopal coinage was suspended for several years, and the only estate Wulfrid was granted after 825, he received from King Wiglaf of Mercia. In 829, Egbert conquered Mercia, only for Wiglaf to recover his kingdom a year later. The Scala D.P. Kirby sees Wiglaf's restoration in 830 as a dramatic reversal for Egbert, which was probably followed by his loss of control of the London Mint and the Mercian recovery of Essex and Berkshire, and the historian Heather Edwards states that his immense conquest could not be maintained. However, in the view of Keynes, it is interesting that both Egbert and his son Æthelwulf appear to have respected the separate identity of Kent and its associated provinces, as if there appears to have been no plan at this stage to absorb the southeast into an enlarged kingdom stretching across the whole of southern England, nor does it seem to have been the intention of Egbert and his successors to maintain supremacy of any kind over the kingdom of Mercia. It is quite possible that Egbert had relinquished Mercia of his own volition, and there is no suggestion that any residual antagonism affected relations between the rulers of Wessex and Mercia thereafter. In 838, King Egbert held an assembly at Kingston in Surrey, where Æthelwulf may have received royal consecration by the archbishop. Egbert restored the East Malling estate to Wulfrid's successor as Archbishop of Canterbury, Ceolnoth, in return for a promise of firm and unbroken friendship for himself and Æthelwulf and their heirs, and the same condition is specified in a grant to the See of Winchester. Egbert thus ensured support for Æthelwulf, who became the first son to succeed his father as West Saxon king since 641. At the same meeting, Kentish monasteries chose Æthelwulf as the lord, and he undertook that, after his death, they would have freedom to elect their heads. Wulfrid had devoted his archiepiscopate to fighting against secular power over Kentish monasteries, but Ceolnoth now surrendered effective control to Æthelwulf, whose offer of freedom from control after his death was unlikely to be honoured by his successors. Kentish ecclesiastics and laymen now looked for protection against Viking attacks to West Saxon rather than Mercian royal power. Egbert's conquests brought him wealth far greater than his predecessors had enjoyed, and enabled him to purchase the support which secured the West Saxon throne for his descendants. The stability brought by the dynastic succession of Egbert and Æthelwulf led to an expansion of commercial and agrarian resources, and to an expansion of royal income. The wealth of the West Saxon kings was also increased by the agreement in 838–39 with Archbishop Ceolnoth for the previously independent West Saxon minsters to accept the king as the secular lord in return for his protection. However, there was no certainty that the hegemony of Wessex would prove more permanent than that of Mercia. King of Wessex. When Æthelwulf succeeded to the throne of Wessex in 839, his experience as sub-king of Kent had given him valuable training in kingship, and he in turn made his own sons sub-kings. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, on his accession he gave to his son Æthelstan the kingdom of the people of Kent, and the kingdom of the East Saxons and of the people of Surrey and of the South Saxons. However, Aethelwulf did not give Æthelstan the same power as his father had given him, and although Æthelstan attested his father's charters as king, he does not appear to have been given the power to issue his own charters. Æthelwulf exercised authority in the southeast and made regular visits there. He governed Wessex and Kent as separate spheres, and assemblies in each kingdom were only attended by the nobility of that country. The historian Janet Nelson says that Aethelwulf ran a Carolingian-style family firm of plural realms, held together by his own authority as father king, and by the consent of distinct elites. Quote, he maintained his father's policy of governing Kent through ealdormen appointed from the local nobility and advancing their interests, but gave less support to the church. In 843 Æthelwulf granted 10 hides at Little Chart to Æthelmod, the brother of the leading Kentish ealdorman Ealhiri, and Æthelmod succeeded to the post on his brother's death in 853. In 844 Æthelwulf granted land at Horton in Kent to Humber.Egbert, with permission to transfer parts of it to local landowners, in a culture of reciprocity. This created a network of mutual friendships and obligations between the beneficiaries and the king. Archbishops of Canterbury were firmly in the West Saxon king's sphere. His ealdormen enjoyed the high status, and sometimes attested charters above the king's sons. His reign is the first for which there is evidence of royal priests, and Malmesbury Abbey regarded him as an important benefactor, who is said to have been the donor of a shrine for the relics of St. Aldhelm. After 830, Egbert had followed a policy of maintaining good relations with Mercia, and this was continued by Æthelwulf when he became king. London was traditionally a Mercian town, but in the 830s it was under West Saxon control. Soon after Æthelwulf's succession it reverted to Mercian control. King Wiglaf of Mercia died in 839 and his successor, Beornwulf, revived the Mercian mint in London. The two kingdoms appear to have struck a joint issue in the mid-840s, possibly indicating West Saxon help in reviving Mercian coinage, and showing the friendly relations between the two powers. Berkshire was still Mercian in 844, but by 849 it was part of Wessex, as Alfred was born in that year at the West Saxon royal estate in Wantage, then in Berkshire. However, the local Mercian ealdorman, also called Æthelwulf, retained his position under the West Saxon kings. Beornwulf died in 852 and cooperation with Wessex continued under Burgred, his successor as King of Mercia, who married Æthelwulf's daughter Æthelsworth in 853. In the same year Æthelwulf assisted Burgred in a successful attack on Wales to restore the traditional Mercian hegemony over the Welsh. In 9th century Mercia and Kent, royal charters were produced by religious houses, each with its own style. But in Wessex there was a single royal diplomatic tradition, probably by a single agency acting for the king. This may have originated in Egbert's reign, and it becomes clear in the 840s when Æthelwulf had a Frankish secretary called Felix. There were strong contacts between the West Saxon and Carolingian courts. The Annals of St. Bertin took particular interest in Viking attacks on Britain, and in 852 Lupus, the abbot of Ferrières under protege of Charles the Bull, wrote to Æthelwulf congratulating him on his victory over the Vikings and requesting a gift of lead to cover his church roof. Lupus also wrote to his most beloved friend Felix, asking him to manage the transport of the lead. Unlike Canterbury and the southeast, Wessex did not see a sharp decline in the standard of Latin in charters in the mid-9th century, and this may have been partly due to Felix and his continental contacts. Lupus thought that Felix had great influence over the king. Charters were mainly issued from royal estates in counties which were the heartland of ancient Wessex, namely Hampshire, Somerset, Wiltshire and Dorset, with a few in Kent. An ancient division between East and West Wessex continued to be important in the 9th century, with the boundary being Selwood Forest on the borders of Somerset, Dorset and Wiltshire. The two bishoprics of Wessex were Selborne in the west and Winchester in the east. Æthelwulf's family connections seem to have been west of Selwood, but his patronage was concentrated further east, particularly on Winchester, where his father was buried, and where he appointed Swithin to succeed Helmstan as bishop in 852 to 853. However, he made a grant of land in Somerset to his leading ealdorman, Æthelwulf, and on the 26th of December 846 he granted a large estate to himself in Southams in West Devon. He thus changed it from royal domain, which he was obliged to pass on to his successor as king, to bookland, which could be transferred as the owner pleased, so he could make land grants to followers to improve security in a frontier zone. Viking threat. Viking raids increased in the early 840s on both sides of the English Channel, and in 843 Æthelwulf was defeated by the companies of 35 Danish ships at Carhampton in Somerset. In 850 sub-king Æthelstan and ealdorman Ealhary of Kent won a naval victory over a large Viking fleet off Sandwich in Kent, capturing 9 ships and driving off the rest. Æthelwulf granted Ealhary a large estate in Kent, but Æthelstan is not heard of again, and probably died soon afterwards. The following year the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records 5 different attacks on southern England. A Danish fleet of 350 Viking ships took London and Canterbury, and when King Beornwulf of Mercia went to the relief he was defeated. The Vikings then moved on to Surrey, where they were defeated by Æthelwulf and his son Æthelbald at the Battle of Aclea. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the West Saxon levies that made the greatest slaughter of a heathen that we have heard tell of up to the present day. The Chronicle frequently reported victories during Æthelwulf's reign won by levies led by ealdormen, unlike the 870s when royal command was emphasized, reflecting a more consensual style of leadership in the earlier period. In 850 a Danish army wintered on Thanet, and in 853 ealdormen Ealhary of Kent and Huda of Surrey were killed in a battle against the Vikings. Also in Thanet, in 855 Danish Vikings stayed over the winter on Shappey, before carrying on the pillaging of eastern England. However, during Æthelwulf's reign Viking attacks were contained and did not present a major threat. Coinage. The silver penny was almost the only coin used in Middle and later Anglo-Saxon England. Æthelwulf's coinage came from a main mint in Canterbury and a secondary one at Rochester. Both had been used by Egbert for his own coinage after he gained control of Kent. During Æthelwulf's reign, there were 4 main phases of the coinage distinguishable at both mints, though they are not exactly parallel and it is uncertain when the transitions took place. The first issue at Canterbury carried a design known as Saxoniorum, which had been used by Egbert for one of his own issues. This was replaced by a portrait design in about 843, which can be subdivided further. The earliest coins have cruder designs than the later ones. At the Rochester Mint the sequence was reversed with an initial portrait design replaced, also in about 843. by a non-portrait design carrying a cross and wedges pattern on the obverse. In about 848 both mints switched to a common design known as Dor-B-Cant. The characters Dor-B on the obverse of these coins indicates either Dora-Bernia or Dora-Brevia, and Cant, referring to Kent, appeared on the reverse. It is possible that the Canterbury Mint continued to produce portrait coins at the same time. The Canterbury issue seems to have been ended in 850 to 851 by Viking raids, though it is possible that Rochester was spared, and the issue may have continued there. The final issue, again at both mints, was introduced in about 852. It has an inscribed cross on the reverse and a portrait on the obverse. Æthelwulf's coinage became debased by the end of his reign, and though the problem became worse after his death, it is possible that the debasement prompted the changes in coin type from as early as 850. Æthelwulf's first Rochester coinage may have begun when he was still sub-king of Kent, under Egbert. A hoard of coins deposited at the beginning of Æthelwulf's reign in about 840, found in the Middle Temple in London, contained 22 coins from Rochester and 2 from Canterbury of the first issue of each mint. Some numismatists argue that the high proportion of Rochester coins means that the issue must have commenced before Egbert's death, but an alternative explanation is that whoever hoarded the coins simply happened to have access to more Rochester coins. No coins were issued by Æthelwulf's sons during his reign. Ceolnoth, Archbishop of Canterbury, throughout Æthelwulf's reign, also minted coins of his own at Canterbury. There were 3 different portrait designs, thought to be contemporary with each of the first 3 of Æthelwulf's Canterbury issues. These were followed by an inscribed cross design that was uniform with Æthelwulf's final coinage. At Rochester, Bishop Beornwulf produced only one issue, a cross and wedges design which was contemporary with Æthelwulf's Saxoniorum issue. In the view of the numismatists Philip Grierson and Mark Blackburn, the mints of Wessex, Mercia and East Anglia were not greatly affected by changes in political control. The remarkable continuity of moneys which can be seen at each of these mints suggests that the actual mint organization was largely independent of the royal administration and was founded in the stable trading communities of each city.